July 31st, 2015, 5:54 a.m. You'd think after all this time that I'd be used to it. But no matter how many times I wake up naked with my body mostly hidden away in some sort of greenery and no memory of the previous night or how I got there, it is still a startling way to begin my day. Since I have no conscious memory of the change between man and wolf, I have to rely on how Gail, my closest friend, has described it. She says it looks like a cross between an episode of violent childbirth and the Wicked Witch of the West melting, as over the space of about 60 seconds I change from a 6'2", 200-pound human into a 100-pound, 6-foot-long gray wolf.
Hello, this is Mark Leslie. Welcome to the virtual launch for STOWE AWAY, the latest book or novella in the Canadian Werewolf series. I'm doing this sort of a last-minute thing, as I often do everything last minute, and I thought I would share a few things. There's a comment there, so it gives you guys a chance to pop some comments down. What kind of werewolf story do you like best? Do you like werewolves as monsters, villains, as evil characters, or do you prefer werewolves as good guys or as heroes? I'm curious to know that in the comments. And there's another question I was going to ask as well. I'm going to tick along the bottom. Is let me know what kind of werewolf you prefer, because there's different styles of werewolf, and so there's the half human, half wolf werewolf, which is bipedal, and it sort of walks like a human but looks more like a wolf. And then there's the wolf that actually transcends right into the actual creature of a wolf. And that's the kind of wolf that Michael Andrews is. And a little bit of a background. So Michael Andrews is a Canadian from a small town, much like me. I'm from a small town, Levack, Ontario, just 45 minutes north of Sudbury, Ontario. And he moved to the Big Apple, to New York, with the dream of becoming a writer, kind of like me, young boy from a small town in Northern Ontario who moved to a larger city wanting to be a writer. And also he was a huge fan of Spider-Man. Oh my God, there's a lot of Michael Andrews in me. Of course, there's a lot of Michael Andrews that's not me, because I have not been bitten by a werewolf and I don't turn into a wolf. So Michael's living in New York City, trying to live with the side effects of being a wolf. And the kind of wolf he turns into is he turns into an actual wolf, and he has no memory of what happens when he's in wolf form. He only has these fleeting glimpses. And he was born out of a story I wrote back, it was many, many, many moons ago, probably 12 or more years ago. And I was writing it for an anthology. And the anthology, the editor was looking for stories about what it was like to be the monster. And I was looking at the guidelines and I thought, well, what would it be like to wake up not knowing what you did the night before, like Jekyll Hyde? And so I wanted my character, who I hadn't even named at the time, he became Michael Andrews later. I wanted to explore what it might be like to live with the side effects of being a werewolf while living in one of the world's most populous cities. So when I write, I'm a discovery writer, as some people call pantser, and I like to just throw characters into a situation, understand a little bit about them, but even learn more about them as they react to things that happen, and say, well, what would happen if you were to wake up naked in Battery Park with a bullet hole in your leg, the taste of human blood in your mouth, no memory of the night before, and figure out, okay, how am I going to figure out what happened? Also, because he's a pseudo celebrity, because he is a best-selling writer who has been seen on TV, he's recognizable. So how does he find some clothes to get back to his apartment? So the whole purpose of the story was that morning trying to get back to his apartment because he had a meeting with his agent that he could not miss. And it was a 10,000-word story, and I wrote that, and it was not accepted for publication in that anthology, but I really liked it. I really liked the character. I showed it to my good friend Sean Costello, Sudbury horror author, and I remember we were having dinner in Sudbury at a restaurant, and when we met after he had read it, and he said, "It's a really good story. What happens next?" And I laughed at him because I was like, nothing happens next. That's it. He makes it, a spoiler, but he makes it to his destination, and that's the resolution. It's done. And then you have to imagine how the rest of his day would go. But then he started asking questions, and that prodded me to start working on the book, which the original version of the book was a Canadian Werewolf in New York, and it took me 10 years to write it. Back in 2006, I started, there was an old podcast called The Writing Show hosted by Paula B. And she had me on her reality program, which was writing horror with Mark Leslie. And she was following me as during NaNoWriMo, I was going to write the first draft of that novel. Well, I only got about 30,000 words into it. And I didn't finish that novel until 2014. And I published it in 2016. So 10 years later, and this was the original version of A Canadian Werewolf in New York. So it was a little bit more literary, and it even is called a humorous thriller because there's a bit of a dark humor in Michael Andrews, and that's something that's really part of him. But I realized that it was appealing to the wrong audience, and so what I did was I recently commissioned Juan Padron, who is a designer I've worked with before, and he redesigned the cover for Canadian Werewolf in New York, which you'll see a little bit more of soon, or you've probably already seen a little bit of, as well as Stow Away, this time around story, as well as two other books yet to have been written, a short story actually, and a book. And that was really, really thrilling for me. So I thought I would time the relaunch, and I relaunched this. So Stow Away, this is the only copy I have. It's a proof copy I got from Ingram. It's a case-bound hardcover. So I've got that. Haven't even seen the paperback proof copies yet because I just approved them digitally. But I had the audiobook, the hardcover, the trade paperback, and the ebook all simultaneously launched. And stay tuned for your chance to figure out how you're going to win a signed copy. I have 5 signed copies of this that will be shipped to me very soon that I'm going to give away randomly to people who comment on the Mark Leslie Facebook author page or a Mark Leslie Lefebvre YouTube page. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tally by the end of today, which is August 18th, all of the names of people who have left comments. I'm going to put you in a random draw, and I'm going to draw 5. You get a chance to win a signed copy, but who knows when they're going to get across the border and to me. So it might not be immediately, but that's what I'm planning on doing. There's another giveaway later on, but that's for something else that we're going to be talking about. I thought at this point in time, since I have to point out my friend Maddie Dalrymple, who I've co-authored with, we co-authored a book together called Taking the Short Tack on Writing Short Fiction. And I found out that Maddie actually used one for some of her covers as well. So that was kind of cool. Thanks, Maddie. Appreciate that. And of course you love the new covers. And yeah, they do. I kind of speak urban fantasy more, so I suspect I might be getting more of the right readers. And thanks, Richard, fellow Cambridge Waterloo author area, fantasy author, says that's what Peter Parker looks like. No, Peter Parker's way more handsome. I love this. So Matthew, oh my God, fellow writer, Creepy Capriol from up in my old stomping ground says, got to go with full wolf, none of that like and half human crap, and hero all the way. Thank you. That is awesome. I appreciate that. I'm just looking for some of the other comments. And oh my God, the voice of Michael Andrews that you heard, Scott Overton, again, another Sudbury author, science fiction and thriller writer, says Michael Andrews' werewolf hero is the kind of werewolf I prefer, hands down. Awesome. Talina, who I was just hanging out with at When Words Collide on the weekend, virtually, of course. Great covers. Thank you so much. And Jan, one of my first readers before Canadian Werewolf was out, who just loved the Michael and Gail story, the romance in there. And Jan was reading it too because she lived in New York, and I needed to know if I got the details right. I'm like, could you look at the details? But then she was hassling me to get the book done. So finally got it done, Jan. Thanks for the prodding. But I will not change into a wolf. And I won't change into a wolf, and here's why. I just checked. Today is the best time of the month not to change into a wolf, because when I write stories with Michael Andrews, so for example, in Stow Away, you probably heard in the opening, it says, this takes place Friday, July 31st, 2015. I actually have to go to the almanac to look to see if he would have actually been a wolf, because he's only a wolf when the phases of the moon are higher than 79%. And Stowaway, just for that little fact, Stowaway takes place about almost a year after the events of the single day that takes place in Canadian Werewolf in New York. So August 14th, 2018. But this year, August 18th, we are at a new moon. We're just in the last of the cycle, and the new moon sort of starts tomorrow. So no chance of anyone turning into a werewolf, at least not in the universe that I'm in charge of or I'm in control of. But it's funny. So you guys had mentioned about the full wolf all the way, and I have to pop this up because I do see that there's several Canadian friends who probably remember this, and I'm just going to pop this up because when Juan did the covers for me, right? Because he initially had an actual werewolf on it, and I was like, no, I forgot to describe that he's actually a wolf. So he did that for me. When I saw the cover for Stowaway, here's what came to mind, and this is the first earworm of the evening. Let me just take that one banner down, and let me just find the little video. This is what I thought of, and maybe you fellow Canadians of a certain age will remember this one.
There's a voice that keeps on calling me. Down the road is where I'll always be. Every stop I make a new friend. Can't stay for long, just turn around and I'm gone again. Maybe tomorrow I'll wanna settle down. Until tomorrow I'll just keep moving on.
So The Littlest Hobo, starring London and a whole bunch of other dogs who could all do different tricks. Now this was a Canadian show, started in the late 60s. It was on through the 70s, even on in the early 80s. And I love that show. I love that song. One of my favorite songs in the world. It was just this traveling. And so when I saw Michael in wolf form on the cover of the book, I thought that looks so much like London, The Littlest Hobo. And so that's one of the earworms I get stuck in my head when I see the cover of this book, and it's been repeatedly stuck through my head since Juan showed me the cover. So now I thought I would infect you guys, because the best way to get rid of an earworm is Art Slade. Cool. And you just released a new book too that I was really excited about. But yeah, Littlest Hobo does indeed rock, my friend. And Chris, you love The Littlest Hobo too, don't you? But that was a long influence. So ironically, two of my favorite TV shows on the same theme were Littlest Hobo, who was this traveling dog who just went and helped people from town to town to town, and The Incredible Hulk with Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno, that TV show where he's constantly on the go, and it was a new cast every time. For something I love that, and yet in my stories, Michael Andrews is in New York, except. He's in New York, but in Stowaway, he has to get on a train. Gail has an issue with her family, and he knows that he needs her, so he needs to get on a train to get to Stowe, Vermont. That's why Stowe is spelled Stowe. It looks like it's spelled wrong, as in Stowaway. He's on his way to Stowe, Vermont. Of course, the timing is bad for him because the train's going to arrive at the station about half an hour after sunset, in which point he's going to be a wolf. So he gets on the train with no plan, as he often does, because, oh gee, he's a procrastinator. I wonder where I got that trait from. He does that, and not only does he not have a chance to figure that out, but he encounters a young girl who is on the run from a human predator. And he befriends her, becomes a father figure to her. And that's why this has been described in some ways as Logan, the Wolverine movie that came out a few years ago. Logan meets Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, because there is some humor, not as much as in the classic John Hughes movie, but it's kind of like that. Older man, young woman, looking after each other, fighting together to stay alive. And they both have different issues that they have to deal with, of course. So that's Stowaway. The next book, just the teaser, he does travel again. And in this particular one, he goes to L.A., where one of his books is being made into a movie. And the teaser, because if you pick up Stow Away, you'll get a teaser from the opening of Fear and Longing in Los Angeles, which is already up for pre-order, and I am about 50,000 words through. I still have another 30, 40, 50,000 words to write, and then cut a whole bunch of them, and then back and forth with my editor, and that should be out, and it has to be out in February for the pre-order date. So that's really, really exciting. So what I want, I popped up an earworm. I'm going to mention another earworm is if you share an earworm, when you think of wolves, when you think of werewolves, when you think of those types of books, what sort of earworms or what sort of songs come to mind? Now, for me, one of the ones that comes to mind very immediately is, so I have a Canadian Werewolf in New York, which was a riff off of an American Werewolf in London. And so a lot of people think of that movie, and also think of the Warren Zevon song, the Werewolves of London. And so that's often a song that gets referred to when people see the title Canadian Werewolf in New York. But the other one that it came up when I was trying to create an ad for Michael Andrews in this situation in New York, either for this time around, which actually I don't have a physical copy of to wave, but because that's the opening, kind of what became the opening few chapters of Canadian Werewolf in New York. Although it was scripted a little bit differently, so it kind of closes up, whereas there's less closure in the first 3 chapters of the novel, and there's a bit more detail of stuff that I plant in for later on. But the other song that comes to mind is Arthur's theme. So what the line is, when you get caught between the moon and New York City, the best that you can do is find some clothes, because that tends to be what every morning, or almost every morning of Michael's existence seems to be, when he can't get a hold of those clothes. So Wade says hi. I say hi to Wade too, and I know Wade is a huge Rush fan, and so I'm going to try and figure out if there's some sort of appropriate Rush lyrics to throw in here. But there's an opportunity if you guys want to. I've got for signed hardcover. I actually have 10 audiobook giveaway codes for each of This Time Around, A Canadian Werewolf in New York, or Stow Away. So if you're an audiobook fan, in the comments, basically it's going to be for the first 10 people to leave comments and say, which of those 3 would you like to hear? This Time Around is a 10,000 word short story read by the awesome Scott Overton. He is the voice of Michael Andrews. A Canadian Werewolf in New York, which is a full-length novel. And Stow Away, which is about 24,000 words. It's a novella, so it's a shorter one. And they're all available in audiobook. And I have codes. So if you're in Canada, the US, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, I think those the territories that it works. I think it works through most of Europe, actually. You'll be able to redeem those codes through Authors Direct, which is kind of cool. So that's kind of I'm getting close to the closure. I was going to do a reading, but I thought a reading, that's no fun. Not when you have a professional narrator like Scott Overton. So if you guys have any questions or whatever, thanks, Maddie. You love audiobooks, and I see that she's the first one to claim this time around. Don't worry, you don't have to post it up live. I'm going to wait and check in on the comments later on this evening, and I will comment back at you or message you to ask you what email I can send the audiobook codes to, because I think this is amazing. Scott is phenomenal. Juan did some amazing covers, and I have to actually thank Scott. Scott, since I think you're watching live, it was Sean Costello, mentor and Sudbury writer, who asked me the question and forced me to write the book because he wanted to know what happened next. And I've always thought of Sean as a mentor, wanting to write better. And then when I heard Scott over the last 6 months, as he was doing the narrations for me, when I heard Scott and I was proofreading the book again with the audio and just listening to it, I was so inspired to hear Scott's voice that I was imagining what he would sound like reading Fear and Longing in Los Angeles. And that's when I decided enough's enough. I've been putting this off for too long. I'm too much of a procrastinator. I worked a deadline. I put the pre-order up, and I planned this. I planned the Stow Away launch about a month ago. Of course, it wasn't until just a few days ago that somebody said, "Oh, so you're doing a virtual book launch, right? You help all kinds of authors with virtual book launches." And I said, never thought of doing it for myself, actually, but that's a good idea. I should come up with something. So, question Maddie asks is, how did you find Scott Overton as the narrator? I knew Scott, actually. So Scott and I probably met through Sudbury Writers Guild. I was a member for a little while, even though I didn't live there anymore. Actually, no, the first time I met Scott was hosting a morning radio program in Sudbury. He is now retired from that and writing full time. But Scott came to, I think it might have been my very first book launch in 2004 for One Hand Screaming at the Sudbury chapters. I remember he interviewed me with a little cassette. And then we just we corresponded since then, so it was amazing. And then Dead Air was I think was Scott's first novel, which was a really awesome thriller about a Sudbury radio personality and the weird connections people think they have with radio personalities and how dangerous that can be. Phenomenal look. If you think living the morning show DJ life is glamorous, read Dead Air. You'll understand. But that's how I met Scott. And Scott and I think we did the initial thing through Find Away Voices. I think we connected through there because he was set up as a narrator. But for these last ones, I think we just went and did them directly. Probably because I was impatient and I didn't have all the metadata set up. And I said, "Hey, what would you charge me if I sent you these files?" So that's kind of funny. Jan says, "You are the voice of Mike Landers." Thanks. Appreciate that. That's awesome. Awesome, Jan. I do appreciate that, although I don't think I can read it quite as well. And then Wade, our Rush fan, said, "Funny, if not surprising, you mentioned Rush lyrics. I woke up with Time Stands Still in my head today." Congrats. Thanks, Wade. Appreciate that. That's cool. Michael Bradley's Dead Air. What? I'm not sure. What is that? Is there another book called Dead Air? No, Scott Overton's Dead Air. So I'm not sure. Cool. And John, who I remember from stage days, singing and acting on stage in my high school, he's going to give the series a read. Careful, you might get fur in your mouth when you're reading it, John. And Scott says, "Great memories," and thanks for all the kind words. No, thank you for the inspiration, Scott. I really do appreciate that. So don't forget, chance to get signed hardcovers and audiobooks as well. So with the audiobooks, just let me know which of this time around, A Canadian Werewolf in New York or Stowaway, you would be interested in. So I think I don't want to hold you guys up long. I'm sure you have something. You can also leave a comment that says your favorite werewolf earworm, and that could qualify for an opportunity to get one of the audiobooks as well, which I'll do a random drawing of. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a phenomenal evening. Thanks for sharing a little bit of the celebration with me and Barnaby. He's on this side. Barnaby, who actually dressed up for the occasion. I'm very proud of him. But thank you guys so much. Really, really appreciate that. And I'm going to leave you with a little bit more from that opening scene from the movie. That's coming, right? I can have confidence that eventually that'll happen. But from the audiobook version of Stowaway, and you're going to hear Scott Overton just read a little bit more of Michael's voice as he's waking up that morning. In this time, he actually is in Central Park. So thank you guys so much, and have a wonderful night.
I imagine these mornings are similar to what career drunks or drug addicts might experience waking up in strange places every morning, those first few confusing seconds at least. For me, it's a little different. Sadly, there's no manual, no Werewolves for Dummies book to help explain my specific situation or predicament. But I have, at least, established a bit of a routine or a process of dealing with the cycles of the wolf I experience every month. I tend to plan out most of my transformations in the large green space of southern Central Park in Manhattan, and have the presence of mind to hide a change of clothes for the next day. Where else, after all, can a werewolf safely make his change in such a large metropolis?